Hello AS, or should I say A2 now, as it's officially the summer, so you're all officially second year students, or at least that's what I think anyway. I hope you're enjoying the summer so far. Apologies for the video that didn't have the sound on it, that wasn't very helpful, was it? With the summer task. What I'll do is I'll go through that video now, talk you through the tasks that you need to complete, and I'm also going to email you the content analysis diaries that you need to conduct content analysis on, and possibly a worksheet to structure it. However, you all know about how to structure psychological reports. So, you're going to be looking at the effects of observing aggression on aggressive behaviours. So, already hopefully you can see some links there between social learning theory, the 12-mark question that was on your AS paper, all the things that we've looked at. And you're going to write an introduction that includes theories and studies, so you already know about those. I'm going to forward you some A3 pages from the textbook and an aim and a hypothesis. So the reason that you include those, that you're going to include some studies from aggression, is because you are going to be looking at aggression with Andy, so it's preparing you for that. So the more effort you put in with this one, the easier it will be, not only for me, when you start to look at just a tiny bit more research methods. You've almost finished, you're almost there already, thanks to your hard work in bridging. But also you'll be prepared for some of Andy's topic as well as recapping social learning theory, which we looked at previously. You're also going to write a methods section, which is where you explore content analysis and correlation, and you will write a results section and a conclusion section. You do need to know about referencing within psychology. So if you've spoken to any of the A2s, you will have realised that they had, our old A2s now, you will have realised that they had a question on referencing on their exam paper. So you do need to be aware of it. If you do English Lit, if you do English, possibly English Language, if you do History, if you do EPQ, you'll know all about those, but we will have to go through referencing. Okay. So, introduction. Looking at the mark scheme for an introduction. So the reason that I'm doing this whole task is for two reasons. One, because everybody always forgets about content analysis. When I was sat down with the A2s before their exam, they said to me, ask us about things that we don't know so that you can refresh our memories, or ask us questions about things. And one of the first things I always asked them was about content analysis, and they could never remember it. So, and I've found this consistently year after year. So I'm going to drill content analysis into you, because one year on one of the A2 papers, content analysis was the main question, because it sort of said, it gave an example. It said, how would you conduct content, what is content analysis, how would you conduct it, how would you conduct a statistical test on it, what are the strengths and weaknesses of it. So you could potentially lose, say, up to 16 marks on a paper, one of your papers, by not knowing about content analysis. Okay. The other reason that we are doing this is because, as you can see, because it's a mark scheme, you do get asked on and do get marked on being able to write introduction, method, conclusion, etc. So they could ask you, what is an introduction for? What is it? They could ask you to write an introduction. They could ask you what an introduction is for, what the purpose of it is. So if you've done that, again, that's something else that I consistently found that students weren't aware of. So I can always remember my first year, we taught them quite carefully about abstracts and what an abstract is, which we will look at with you. And the first thing they did, they came running up and said, what's an abstract? We couldn't remember what an abstract was. So by doing this task, you'll get ingrained into your head what content analysis is. You'll also get ingrained into your head what is the structuring of report writing, because you need to know it. So the reason we made you do the experiments last year, the reason that we're going to make you do them next year, is because you need to know about how to write report methods, because it could be in your exam. Okay. So there you go. First sentence says, candidates need to show an understanding of reporting convention, so you need to know how to structure a report. The introduction is an important part that provides background information on theories and studies relevant to the investigation. So you need to be able to tell me the introduction has background information on the theories and the studies, if it was asked. Then you get another mark, usually it's 2, because as well as that they review methodological issues and talk about how the current aims and hypotheses were derived. So first thing you're going to do in your report is you are going to talk about different studies and different theories. Start off really broad, so tell me what aggression is, tell me where it all started, or started with social learning theory, give me a little bit of a flavour of what social learning theory is about, and then start to refine it down and go closer and closer to the thing that we're actually talking about, so talking about aggression and essentially the effect of observing media on aggression. You're going to tell me some of the problems with the previous research. And for us, luckily, just because of the type of studies that we're going to look at, it's been very carefully planned. There's been lots of research into looking at things retrospectively, kind of experimental research, but there hasn't been anything on. So you'll see lots of lab studies like Bobo doll study, or the different ones from you're going to look at A2. But what there hasn't been, technically, I mean there has, but what we're going to say for ours is that there hasn't been any research into natural everyday life TV or media observations and their effect on aggression. So it kind of so we've looked lots at experimental methods, but we haven't looked at natural everyday life, which is why I've asked you to write your TV diaries, and you're going to narrow that down. So that's one of the things you talk about: theories, studies, problems with the studies, and then how your study is going to resolve that. Well, your study is resolving that because you've got natural everyday life TV diaries rather than experimental design, i.e. watch this violent film, see what we do. Okay, so your introduction is perfectly prepared for you. And there we go. It says it starts by discussing the research and gradually moving towards an explanation of why you would like to complete your research. So you're narrowing it down. At university we also told you to think about it like a funnel. Start off really broad, like any introduction, narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down. This is what I'm going to do. And then you finish with an aim and a hypothesis. Okay. The structure, so there we go, and then the general research, the problem with this research, how our proposal will help fill this gap, the aim of our proposal, and the hypothesis. So we're going to ask for a directional, alternative hypothesis, and a null. So the directional, the reason we do this, and this is really important, but of course you'll remember this from your paper 2 exam, we are using a directional hypothesis because we have previous research which suggests which direction we should be heading. It's really important. If you know previous research has shown that observing aggression does lead to aggression, which we know that that's the case, there is research that suggests that, then we would expect that from our research. However, if we didn't have any research, we'd start with a non-directional because we don't know what's going to happen, and of course you always have a null. And remember, it's a correlation, so the hypothesis must use the word relationship. We're not looking for a difference, we're looking for a relationship, and everything must be operationalised. So you don't have an IV and a DV, you have two covariables. What is the covariable 1? It's the score that you're going to give, and we'll explain that in a minute on your content analysis. And then score 2 is the self-assessment score that you were given for aggression. So not aggressive TV watching and aggression. You need to correlate to operationalise that. How do we know what those scores are? Where did we get them from? Okay. The next section you would write is the method. So you've done your introduction, done, sorted. Then you look at the method. So you've got to make sure, and this is again from the mark scheme, there's enough detail to allow another researcher to carry out this research in the future. So everything needs to be, as you know about reliability, everything needs to be tested for reliability. So you may repeat the experiment at a later date, or someone else might repeat it, to see if the same results can be found, or if statistically it's just a fluke and they are due to chance. So this is from the mark scheme. It needs to be written clearly, succinctly, in a way that could be replicated. So clearly, succinctly, don't waffle on, don't waste your time over the summer. You've got lots of fun things to do, keep it focused, but make sure it is replicable. So you would talk about how we collected the content analysis, how we collected the self-report, and then you would talk about how we conducted the content analysis itself. So what did we do? What categories did you use? Don't forget all of that everything that we've looked at in class. So you would collect your sample, you familiarised yourself, so you conducted a pilot, familiarised yourself, you developed behavioural categories, you applied those behavioural categories and created a tally chart. Which you won't include, so don't include the tally chart in the method section. Or of course, if you're doing thematic, it's exactly the same, apart from you read it and identified general themes. You can do both, you can do either. I really don't mind which way you approach it. The easiest way would be through tallying. Then I would recommend, so the absolutely ideal way would be both thematic and tallying, so content and thematic and coding. However, if you're only going to do one, I'd encourage you to do coding, because thematic makes it a bit more tricky, and not in a stretch and challenge kind of way, just in a really difficult, not very helpful kind of way. But the ideal would be to do both. It should be set out in a conventional reporting style underneath appropriate headings. So I've just given you the perfect headings. So that's good. And the important factor here, so these are every single one of those sentences is copied directly from the mark scheme, is that the study could be replicated. So imagine that I was then going to repeat it. What would I do? Okay. In the method, you talk about the so we've got sample, pilot, develop coding categories, tally, and then there's an example. If I were you, I wouldn't. In the method, you are going to continue to do that. So what you do, apologies. content analysis, just realised I've not explained. You know about sample, pilot, coding categories, tally. What I'm going to ask you to do, and you're going to do this bit in the method because this is still part of the method, the results you will show in the results. I would like you to, for each content analysis diary, I would like you to, so for example here I'm looking at happy things, so this isn't something you would look for because you're looking for aggression, but I was looking for how much happiness there is in people's TV watching that they have. Every single content analysis diary, take it, identify, you've got your coding categories already, and I would like you to conduct a tally on each one. So every time they mention it, in mine it was mentioned smiling, laughing, hugging someone, saying something positive. So tally those down and give yourself a total. Okay, so every single content analysis diary should have a total at the end for how many aggressive, and if you wanted to be dead clever, how many non-aggressive, although it is aggressive that we're focusing on, words, behaviours, explanations for your TV diary that you had. So every single one you will be able to allocate an aggressive score of this or one aggressive behaviour, no aggressive behaviours, although that would be difficult, you might want to say define at least one, and then up to 20, 30, 40, who knows how aggressive people's TV watching is. Okay. So every single content analysis diary should have a total on it. There you go. And then the results. So in the results you would have a frequency table. So all this means is you have participant 1, participant 2, participant 3. You would note down their aggression score, so if they set the score they gave themselves, and then you'd note down the total content analysis score. You would create a scatter graph, because of course we're looking at correlation, so I want a frequency table and I want a scatter graph, and you develop a correlation coefficient. Unless you love maths, you're really brilliant at it and you really want to try, or you really want to try it, then please don't worry about calculating the correlation coefficient yourselves. Go on to the if you Google correlation coefficient calculator and find that any of those on the internet, you can use those exactly as we looked at. So the correlation coefficient is plus 0.05 or whatever it might be. Okay, so you just note down what the correlation coefficient is, and then tell me, what does it tell us? Do we have a positive, negative, no correlation? It's a very small correlation, blah blah blah, weak, strong, whatever. Correlation of observing aggression. So obviously the more we observe aggression, the higher the score would be, and then aggressive score, so the higher the aggression score would be if it was a positive correlation. So that is what you would include. And then your conclusion sections. What do the results tell us? Don't just restate the results again. What does a correlation mean? So we've said that there was a strong positive correlation. Well, what does that tell us? What does that mean? That means that as aggression scores increase, self-rating aggression scores increase, so did observations of violent behaviours, or vice versa. The observation of violent behaviours, as they increased, the self-rating score and aggression increased as well, suggesting that observing violence does increase aggression. Simple. So don't just restate the results, have a go at that. Relate your conclusion back to the research in the introduction. Does it support the previous findings? So lots of the previous research suggests that observing violent behaviour does increase observing violent behaviour does increase violent behaviour. Does your conclusion support that? And remember, you can be it doesn't have to. It's all about creating the results, kind of having a go with that, and then evaluating your study. And this is where I want your discussion of all of these things to come in. So reliability, validity, and features of science. So everything that you have covered in bridging you must use, otherwise it'll go. Okay, and it's really complicated stuff, so, and I want you to remember it so we can get started. I don't want to have to go back over research method stuff. Boring, not very fun. I would like to move on to the next thing very, very quickly. So that is why I'd like to use reliability and validity, features of science, have them fresh in your memory when you come back for the second year. And also it saves you lots and lots of time looking at awful research methods, but also obviously in your exams they're definitely key questions that will be asked, or things that will be you need to refer to. So talking about validity, reliability, what they mean, why are they important, that kind of stuff. So it's really important that you're aware of those. Wider implications, what impact does it have on people's lives and actions? So for example, if it's does it support the idea of needing the TV watershed? So if there's if observing violence leads to violence, does it support the idea that we should continue the watershed? Does it support the idea that we should continue certificates on film? Should we go further? Because there's a huge amount of research. As a doctor that described violent video games and violent TV as a pandemic similar to obesity or whatever else it might be. It's the health sector's new pandemic, the fact that it can increase aggression so significantly. So are there certain things that need to be done? Does it have an impact on how children let let children watch their TV, their parents, anything like that? And then suggest for further research. So what would you do differently? How would you move it forward? Is the sample too small? Blah 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 blah. All of those things. So what kind of research could we lead to? What are the problems? And that is everything that you need to do. So quick recap. First thing you need to do, write an introduction. You need to refer to previous studies and theories. You can talk about social learning theory, and then I also want you to look on the A3 sheets that I've scanned and copied that will prepare you for Andy's session as well. You need to include at least 1 or 2. I'd say 2 is the absolute minimum. If you'd like to do more, that's brilliant, and I'd really encourage you to, because the more you're familiar with aggression, the better, obviously, for coming into Andy's. Tell me problems with that research. The problem is that it's mostly experimental. We haven't seen any natural real life data. That's why we're using content diaries from real life. So we're taking from people's natural TV watching, and then have an aim and a hypothesis. Then what you do for the method, you are going to explain to me how you collected the content diaries, how you collected the self-assessment score, and you are going to explain to me how you got a individual total for each diary. So you would go through, you would do your pilot, you'd do familiarisation, identify categories, you would tally each category, and then you would total them up at the end. So you could say this content analysis diary has a total of 15 aggressive mentions to aggressive TV watching, something like that, or none, or however many. And then you would talk about the fact that you conducted a content analysis. You would then provide the results. The next thing you do go on to is the results. So you'd have a frequency table, participant 1, aggression score, total score, or whatever it might be. And then you would do a scatter graph. So you design a scatter graph exactly like we've done in class. And then you would conduct a correlation coefficient. Don't bother working it out yourself unless you'd really like to. Have a go on the calculator, the correlation coefficient calculator on the internet, type it all in, and then explain to me what does that mean. Nothing more than just whether it's strong, weak, positive, negative, zero correlation, etc. Then in the results you explain what that means. So what does it mean to have a positive, strong positive correlation, or whatever it might be. And then you go on, and then you go on to your conclusion, where you talk about what does that tell us, what does the conclusion tell us? What were the problems with the study? What were the wider implications, and so on and so on. If you have any questions at all, please get in touch with me straight away. Do not leave this till the last minute. You can't do it. You'll have forgotten everything from previous years. This is to keep it ticking over in your mind. If I were you, I'd approach it as doing method section 1 week, introduction 1 week, method 1 week, results 1 week, conclusion 1 week. That's 4 weeks. Then you've got a couple of weeks free just to enjoy yourself, and it won't take you a week. It'll take you an hour, 2 hours at most for each bit of it. Okay, so it's not a huge task at all. But any questions, please get in touch. Otherwise, have a lovely summer. We will see you on results day, and then of course we'll see you in September.